We received the confirmation from Admiral Paparo himself. He said that this will still be the biggest Balikatan exercise despite the war going on in Middle East.
Come on! Come on!
81 years ago, more than 500,000 Japanese soldiers invaded the Philippines. They bombed Manila. They marched through Bataan. They occupied the islands for nearly 4 years. And by the time it was over, around 500,000 Filipino civilians were dead. The Battle of Manila alone killed 100,000 people, making it one of the most devastating urban battles in the entire Second World War. Now here is what is happening today. Japanese combat troops carrying weapons are about to step onto Philippine soil again. Not as occupiers, not as enemies, but as allies, for the first time since the end of World War II. And if that does not make you stop and think about how dramatically the world is changing right now, nothing will. But this is not just a symbolic handshake between former enemies. This is a direct military response to one country, China, whose navy has now pushed past the first island chain, past the second island chain, and whose aircraft carriers were spotted launching fighter jets near Iwo Jima itself, the same island where nearly 6,000 American Marines died fighting Japan in 1945. So the question is, what has China done that is so threatening that two countries with one of the most painful shared histories on Earth have decided we must stand together now? And more importantly, what does this tell us about where the world is heading? That is what we are going to break down today. Every layer, every detail, every angle that the mainstream media is not connecting for you. Before we go deep into this, if you are the kind of person who wants to understand the geopolitical chess moves happening in the Indo-Pacific before they hit the headlines, this is the channel for you. We break down what is really happening in the South China Sea, Philippine, defense, and global security every single week. So if you have not already, hit that subscribe button, turn on the bell, and let me ask you a question in the comments. Do you think Japan sending combat troops to the Philippines is a smart defensive move, or is it a dangerous provocation that could push China into conflict? Drop your answer below. I genuinely want to know what you think. Let us get into it. Here is the picture as it stands today, in April 2026. In exactly 14 days, on April 20th, the largest joint military exercise in Indo-Pacific. History is about to begin. It is called Balikatan 2026. Balikatan. That is a Filipino word. It means shoulder to shoulder. And this year, it is not just the Philippines and the United States standing shoulder to shoulder. For the first time ever, Japan is sending several hundred self-defense forces troops, armed, combat-capable troops, to participate directly in defensive military operations on Philippine territory. Let me say that again so it sinks in. Japan is sending armed soldiers to the Philippines for the first time since 1945.
We received the confirmation from Admiral Paparo himself. He said that this will still be the biggest Balikatan exercise despite the war going on in Middle East.
General Romeo Bronner Jr., the chief of the armed forces of the Philippines, confirmed it publicly. He said, and I am paraphrasing here, that Japan has moved from being observers in previous years to actively deploying combat troops. He estimated up to 1,000 Japanese soldiers could be on Philippine soil. And he added something remarkable. He said, from being on opposing sides in the past, we are now working together as partners. Think about the weight of that statement. The last time Japanese combat forces were in the Philippines, they were fighting against Filipinos. The Bataan Death March, the Battle of Corregidor, the destruction of Manila. These are wounds that have not fully healed even after 80 years. And yet, here they are, standing together. But it goes beyond Japan. Balikatan 2026 will also feature Australian forces, French warships, including an amphibious assault ship and a frigate from France's Jeanne d'Arc mission, and observers from multiple NATO countries. The exercises will span across the Philippine archipelago, from Luzon in the north to disputed waters in the west, and will include live fire drills, amphibious operations, cyber defense exercises, and for the first time, space-related military operations.
Detected holding point 14 left.
The Armed Forces of the Philippines chief also revealed something critical. He said the exercises will draw heavily from lessons learned in two active conflicts, the Russia-Ukraine war and the United States war with Iran. Specifically, the importance of cyber warfare, the ability to disable radar systems, knock out command centers, and paralyze enemy communications before a single shot is fired. Admiral Samuel Paparo, the commander of U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, personally confirmed that despite America's ongoing military operations in the Middle East against Iran, the scale of Balikatan 2026 will not be reduced by a single unit. He said this will be the biggest Balikatan in history, period. And that should tell you something. When the most powerful military in the world is fighting a war in the Middle East and still says, we are not pulling a single soldier out of the Pacific, that means the Pacific is where the real long-term game is being played. So, what is behind all of this? To understand that, we need to go back in time. On December 8, 1941, just 10 hours after the attack on Pearl Harbor, Japan launched its invasion of the Philippines. More than 500,000 Japanese soldiers would eventually serve in the Philippine campaign. Manila fell in January 1942. The American and Filipino forces retreated to Bataan, where they fought desperately for 3 months with almost no food, no medicine, and no reinforcements. General Douglas MacArthur promised help was coming. It never did. When Bataan fell in April 1942, roughly 75,000 American and Filipino prisoners of war were forced on a brutal 65-mile march to their prison camp. Thousands died along the way, beaten, bayoneted, shot, beheaded by their captors. The world would come to know it as the Bataan Death March. The Japanese occupation lasted until 1945. When the liberation of Manila finally came, the Japanese garrison fought to the death. They massacred civilians. The Battle of Manila reduced the city to rubble and killed an estimated 100,000 people. It was one of the deadliest urban battles of the entire war, mentioned alongside Stalingrad and Warsaw. By the end of the war, approximately 500,000 Filipino civilians had perished under Japanese occupation. So when we say Japan is now sending armed troops back to the Philippines, understand the historical gravity of that sentence. This is not a minor diplomatic development. This is two nations choosing to set aside one of the most painful chapters of the 20th century because they see a threat so serious that the wounds of the past must be put aside. And what makes this moment even more extraordinary is how it happened. The legal foundation was laid in July 2024 when Japan and the Philippines signed the Reciprocal Access Agreement, a defense pact that simplifies the process of deploying troops and equipment between the two countries. The Philippines became only the third country in the world to sign such an agreement with Japan, after Australia and the United Kingdom. That agreement entered into force on September 11, 2025. It was built on top of years of quiet cooperation. Japan has become one of the Philippines' most trusted partners, providing Coast Guard vessels, radar systems, and official security assistance. Public opinion polls show Japan enjoying remarkably high levels of trust among Filipinos, something that would have been unthinkable just a few decades ago. But here is the thing about trust. It is not built in good times. It is built when both sides look at the same threat and decide, we need each other. And that threat has a name. Japan is not just sending soldiers to Balikatan. What Japan is doing right now is far bigger than one exercise. On April 5th, 2026, literally yesterday as I am recording this, Japan's defense minister, Shinjiro Koizumi, stood on the island of Iwo Jima, the same Iwo Jima where nearly 6,000 American Marines and nearly 20,000 Japanese soldiers died in one of the bloodiest battles of World War II. And from that sacred ground, he made a stunning admission. Japan, the third largest economy in the world, a country that spends billions on defense, just admitted that it has a gaping hole in its own security on its Pacific side. They are planning to build port facilities capable of handling large military vessels. They are considering installing floating piers to bring in construction materials. And here is a detail that is genuinely remarkable. Japan is looking at establishing an air defense identification zone over the Ogasawara Islands, where no such zone has existed since the end of World War II. That means for the first time in 81 years, Japan would formally monitor and control the airspace over these Pacific islands. Why? Because in June 2025, something happened that shook the Japanese defense establishment to its core. China's aircraft carrier Liaoning was spotted operating east of Iwo Jima, conducting F-fighter jet takeoffs and landings in the waters between Japan's remote islands. This was the first time any Chinese aircraft carrier had crossed the second island chain. And it did not come alone. China deployed both the Liaoning and the Shandong simultaneously in the Western Pacific. Another first. Japan's defense ministry tracked close to 520 takeoffs and landings across both carriers during that deployment. This is not hypothetical. This is happening right now. But Japan is not doing this alone. And the coalition forming around the Philippines is something Beijing never expected. Let me walk you through who is showing up in the Philippines right now. Because this is not just a US-Japan story. This is a global response. The United States remains the backbone. Washington has approved more than 500 joint military activities with the Philippines for 2026 alone. That is more than one per day. It is the most in the history of the alliance. And the US is not just sending troops, it is deploying some of its most advanced weapon systems. The Typhoon Mid-Range Capability Missile System, a ground-based launcher capable of firing Tomahawk cruise missiles with a range exceeding 1,600 kilometers, has been stationed in northern Luzon since 2024. From that position, those missiles can reach deep into southern China, covering major People's Liberation Army facilities and key maritime corridors across the entire South China Sea. The U.S. also deployed the Navy Marine Expeditionary Ship Interdiction System, an anti-ship missile system to Batan Island in Batanes, the northernmost Philippine province, directly facing the Bashi Channel. That channel is the critical waterway separating the Philippines from Taiwan, and it does not stop at missiles. A US-led group of 16 nations called the Partnership for Indo-Pacific Industrial Resilience has agreed to explore building an ammunition assembly and production facility right in the Philippines. When asked about this, China's foreign ministry spokesperson issued a warning. He said, and I paraphrase, that if the Philippines is willing to become a powder keg and ammunition depot, it will only backfire on itself. That is how seriously Beijing is taking this. Now France. The French Navy is deploying its largest Balikatan contingent to date through the Jeanne d'Arc training mission, including the amphibious assault ship Dixmude and the frigate Aconite. Last year, France deployed the Charles de Gaulle Carrier Strike Group for a joint patrol with the Philippines in the South China Sea, the first of its kind between Paris and Manila. France has also committed to providing 40 patrol vessels to the Philippine Coast Guard and is building a shipyard in the Philippines to construct half of them locally. Australia is expanding its role. Canada signed a defense cooperation agreement with the Philippines. The United Kingdom has a reciprocal access agreement with Japan. South Korea is watching closely. And here is what makes this coalition different from anything we have seen before. This is not just America and its allies doing exercises for show. This is an integrated military architecture being built in real time with forward-deployed missiles, ammunition production facilities, reciprocal troop access agreements, and shared intelligence networks, all centered on one geographic reality: the South China Sea and the Taiwan Strait. The question that everyone is asking but few are answering honestly is, why now? What has China done that has triggered this unprecedented response? To understand why this is happening now, you need to understand the three-front pressure campaign that China has been running. Front 1, Scarborough Shoal and the West Philippine Sea. In March 2026 alone, a Chinese frigate nearly rammed the Philippine Navy's BRP Benguet near Pag-asa Island. In 2025, Chinese vessels used high-pressure water cannons and physically rammed Filipino fishing boats at Thitu Island. Front 2, Island Building. China's dredging fleet, 22 vessels strong, is constructing what could become the largest artificial island in the entire South China Sea at Antelope Reef in the Paracels. This is China's biggest island building operation since 2017. The island is positioned for a potential military runway. Front 3, the Pacific Push. As I mentioned, China sailed 2 aircraft carriers past the second island chain for the first time in June 2025. This was not a one-off. It is part of a deliberate strategy to project power deeper into the Pacific, toward Guam, toward the sea lanes that connect Asia to North America, and toward the very islands where the United States and Japan fought each other 80 years ago. Now layer on top of this the global picture. The United States is currently fighting a war with Iran. Operation Epic Fury has seen Tomahawk strikes launched from Navy destroyers. Carrier strike groups have been redirected to the Middle East. Beijing is watching. And every time American attention shifts westward, toward Iran, toward the Middle East, China has historically used that window to advance its position in the Pacific. It happened during the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, when China quietly built artificial islands in the South China Sea while the world was not watching. And there are real concerns it could happen again. This is precisely why the United States, Japan, the Philippines, Australia, France, and others are building this coalition now, not tomorrow, not after the Iran situation stabilizes. Now, because if there is one lesson that history teaches about the Indo-Pacific, it is this: the window of opportunity does not open twice. If you are still watching, you are exactly the audience this channel is built for. The kind of person who wants to see the full picture, not just the headlines. We put these deep dives together every week, covering the South China Sea, Philippine defense, and the real geopolitical moves that are shaping our world. If you got value from this, hit subscribe, share this with someone who needs to see it, and leave a comment, because I read every single one. Now let me take you to where all of this is heading. Here is the honest truth. We are entering the most volatile period in Indo-Pacific security since the end of the Cold War, possibly since World War II. The pieces on the board are moving faster than at any point in recent memory. Japan is rearming, not in secret, not reluctantly, openly, deliberately, and with the explicit acknowledgement that the threat environment has fundamentally changed. Japan is revising its 3 core security documents: the National Security Strategy, the National Defense Strategy, and the Defense Build-Up Program, all by the end of this year. The Pacific will be a central pillar. The Philippines is transforming from a lightly armed archipelago into a frontline node of the first island chain defense network. With Typhoon missiles on Luzon, anti-ship systems in Batanes, a planned ammunition factory, and the largest array of allied military exercises in its history, Manila is becoming the most strategically significant U.S. ally in Southeast Asia. The expanding trilateral cooperation between Washington, Tokyo, and Manila. The growing involvement of France, Australia, Canada, and the UK. These are not temporary arrangements. These are structural shifts in the global security architecture. But here's what keeps defense planners awake at night. China's strategy is not irrational. From Beijing's perspective, every missile deployed to the Philippines, every Japanese soldier landing in Luzon, every French frigate sailing through the South China Sea, all of this confirms what Chinese leaders have long feared, that the United States is building a ring of containment around China, designed to strangle its rise. And when a great power feels cornered, history tells us that miscalculation becomes the greatest danger. Not deliberate war, miscalculation. A Chinese frigate locks fire control radar on a Philippine vessel. A Japanese fighter scrambles too close to a Chinese carrier. An accidental collision in contested waters. One wrong move, one moment of panic, one commander who decides to escalate rather than de-escalate. And you have a crisis that could draw in nuclear-armed powers. That is the stakes. That is why Balikatan 2026 matters. That is why Japan is sending combat troops to the Philippines. That is why the world should be paying attention to the Indo-Pacific right now, not just to what is happening in the Middle East. Let me leave you with this thought. In 1945, Japanese and Filipino soldiers were killing each other in the ruins of Manila. The city was burning. The death toll was catastrophic. No one standing in those ruins could have imagined a world where Japanese combat troops would return to the Philippines as allies, not to fight Filipinos, but to stand beside them. And yet, here we are. History has a way of making the unthinkable become inevitable when the threat is real enough. The Indo-Pacific in 2026 is not the calm, distant theater that most people imagine. It is 4 global maritime choke points under simultaneous stress. It is aircraft carriers pushing past island chains. It is Tomahawk missiles positioned within range of the Chinese mainland. It is the biggest military exercise in history about to begin in 14 days. And at the center of it all, 2 former enemies, standing shoulder to shoulder. Because they looked at the world and decided, the past is painful, but the future is more dangerous. That is the story no one else is telling you. And that is why you are here. If you want to stay informed, subscribe, hit the bell, share this video, and I will see you in the next one.
We received the confirmation from Admiral Paparo himself. He said that this will still be the biggest Balikatan exercise despite the war going on in Middle East.
On the morning of March 30th, 2026, a quiet Sunday, something moved across the water west of Luzon. Not fishing boats, not Coast Guard cutters, not the usual gray zone harassment that Filipinos have learned to live with. This time, it was warships, guided missile frigates, fighter jets in formation, and somewhere above Scarborough Shoal, only 240 kilometers from Philippine shores, a bomber circled. The kind that carries missiles designed to sink aircraft carriers. The Chinese military's Southern Theater Command released a video of the operation. They called it a combat readiness patrol. They said it was a response to provocations. They said Scarborough Shoal, which sits inside the Philippines' own exclusive economic zone, belongs to China.
Philippine Coast Guard, pero sa nakita natin kanina ay hindi na...
But here's the part that no one is talking about. This didn't happen in isolation. 5 days earlier, a Chinese missile frigate nearly rammed a Philippine Navy ship near Pag-asa Island. 3 weeks before that, China aimed its fire control radar, a weapons targeting system, at a Philippine frigate near Sabina Shoal. And right now, as you're watching this, 22 Chinese dredgers are building what could become the largest artificial island in the South China Sea. These aren't separate events. This is a pattern. And it's accelerating, because in exactly 18 days, the largest military exercise in Indo-Pacific history is about to begin on China's doorstep. This is what's really happening in the West Philippine Sea. And this is why it matters. Welcome to Indo-Pacific Report. Let's start with what happened on March 30th. China's Southern Theater Command, the military branch responsible for the entire South China Sea, announced it had organized joint naval and air patrols around Scarborough Shoal. State media described the operation as a direct countermeasure to what Beijing calls provocations by individual countries. Such patrols serve as an effective countermeasure to cope with all sorts of rights violation and provocative acts. PLA Southern Theater Command. Now let's be clear about what that statement actually means. The Southern Theater Command doesn't say the Philippines by name. But the message is unmistakable. Scarborough Shoal, which the Philippines calls Bajo de Masinloc, sits roughly 240 kilometers west of Luzon and nearly 900 kilometers from the nearest major Chinese landmass of Hainan. A United Nations-backed tribunal ruled in 2016 that China has no legal basis for its claims there. Beijing rejected that ruling entirely. China seized control of the shoal in 2012 after a tense standoff with Philippine vessels. Since then, Filipino fishermen who fished those waters for generations have been routinely blocked, harassed, and driven away by Chinese Coast Guard ships. But what happened on March 30th went beyond Coast Guard patrols. The deployment of guided missile frigates, fighter aircraft, and bomber formations represents a deliberate escalation. This wasn't gray zone pressure, the low-level harassment that Beijing uses to gradually normalize its presence. This was the PLA Navy showing its teeth. J. Batong Bakal, director of the Institute for Maritime Affairs and Law of the Sea at the University of the Philippines, has said of similar operations in the past, "It's meant to intimidate. It's definitely meant to send a message, a show of force. And the timing tells you everything." This combat patrol happened just 1 day after Philippine and Chinese officials met in Guangzhou, China, for diplomatic talks, the first broad discussion on bilateral relations since March 2023. Both sides described the meeting as candid and productive. So, Beijing sent diplomats to talk with one hand and warships to patrol with the other. If you're finding this breakdown useful, take a second to hit that subscribe button. Over 62,000 people already rely on this channel to stay informed about what's happening in the Indo-Pacific. And we cover developments here in real time as they unfold. Now, 5 days before that combat patrol, something happened near Pag-asa Island that Philippine military officials are calling a clear escalation. On March 25, 2026, the Philippine Navy's BRP Benguet, a World War II-era landing ship tank that has been in service since 1976, was conducting a routine resupply operation near Pag-asa Island, the largest Philippine-held feature in the Spratleys Islands. What happened next was anything but routine. A People's Liberation Army Navy Type 054A guided missile frigate, the Binjo, hull number 532, closed in on the Benguet and passed at what Philippine officials described as a dangerously close distance. According to the Armed Forces of the Philippines Western Command, the Chinese vessel executed an unsafe and unprofessional maneuver that forced the Philippine crew to take evasive action to avoid a collision. Such dangerous maneuvers are provocative and constitute a clear violation of the Convention on the International Regulations for Preventing Collisions at Sea, (COL). Nep Padua, Westcom spokesperson. Now, pay attention to what Rear Admiral Roy Vincent Trinidad said afterward. He pointed out that past confrontations in these waters have mostly involved Coast Guard vessels and maritime militia, the civilian layer of China's so-called gray zone strategy. But this was different. It has happened in the past, but since it's been a while since we've had warship-to-warship encounters, this is already an escalation. Rear Admiral Roy Vincent Trinidad. That distinction matters. When a Coast Guard cutter blocks a resupply boat, it's a provocation. When a guided missile frigate nearly rams a naval vessel, it's a potential act of war. And this wasn't the first military-grade incident in March. 3 weeks earlier, on March 7th, a Chinese corvette reportedly locked its fire control radar on the Philippine Navy frigate BRP Miguel Malvar near Sabina Shoal. A fire control radar lock means a weapon system is actively targeting you. In any Navy's rules of engagement, that is considered a hostile act. When asked about the incident, Admiral Trinidad said, "We have to understand Chinese warfighting thought, which is to force us to fire the first shot, to force us to escalate the situation." So the Philippines faces a calculation that is becoming more dangerous by the week. Absorb escalation after escalation, or respond and risk being blamed for starting a conflict. Manila, so far, has chosen restraint. But restraint has its limits. While the world focuses on Scarborough Shoal and the Spratleys, China is doing something further north in the Paracel Islands that may be even more consequential, and almost no one is paying attention. At Antelope Reef, a once-submerged coral formation in the Crescent Island group of the Paracels, China has launched what analysts are calling its most significant island-building operation since 2017. Here are the numbers. As of late February 2026, satellite imagery from the Open Source Center, a UK-based research group, showed 22 large dredging vessels operating at the site. They are pumping sand, rock, and crushed coral onto the reef to create developable land. The reclamation area already spans more than 15 square kilometers, roughly 3,700 acres. To put that in perspective, Mischief Reef in the Spratleys, one of China's largest artificial islands with a runway, hangars, radar installations, and missile batteries, covers about 5.6 square kilometers. Antelope Reef, if construction continues at its current pace, could surpass it. If construction proceeds at the pace seen in satellite imagery, Antelope Reef is set to become China's largest feature in the Paracels and potentially in the entire South China Sea. Asia Maritime Transparency Initiative, CSIS. Satellite imagery reveals features consistent with military base construction, straight quay walls for berthing, a sheltered anchorage cleared of obstructions, a carved entrance channel, and ample space for base infrastructure. None of the 22 dredging vessels appear on commercial tracking systems. On public AIS data, the entire area looks empty. This is deliberate invisibility. China is building in the open, but hiding it from the systems the world uses to track maritime activity. And the timing raises critical questions. China officially told the world it had stopped island-building operations in the South China Sea over a decade ago. This is the clearest signal yet that Beijing considers that commitment dead. The Philippines doesn't directly claim the Paracels. Those are disputed primarily between China and Vietnam. But the strategic implications are enormous. An operational military base at Antelope Reef would extend China's surveillance and strike radius deeper into the South China Sea, further tightening the net around Philippine waters and making every resupply mission, every patrol, every fishing trip in the West Philippine Sea more dangerous. This is the slow game. While combat patrols make headlines, island building changes the map permanently. And once a military base is built, it doesn't leave. So let's step back and look at the full picture. In the space of a single month, March 2026, China has simultaneously operated on 3 separate fronts across the South China Sea. Front 1. Scarborough Shoal. Combat readiness patrols with warships, fighters, and bombers. A direct show of force within the Philippines' exclusive economic zone. Front 2. The Spratleys Islands. A guided missile frigate nearly rammed BRP Benguet near Pag Asa Island. Fire control radar was locked onto BRP Miguel Malvar near Sabina Shoal. Warship-to-warship encounters replacing the previous pattern of Coast Guard harassment.
All back.
Front 3, the Paracel Islands. 22 dredgers constructing what will likely become the largest artificial island in the South China Sea at Antelope Reef. Silent, invisible on tracking systems, and completely unchallenged. This is not random aggression. This is coordinated strategic pressure applied simultaneously across the entire theater. China's strategy has always been about changing the status quo so gradually that no single event triggers a response. Each individual incident, a combat patrol here, a near collision there, a few more acres of dredged coral, seems manageable in isolation. But taken together, they represent a fundamental shift in the balance of power. And this is the critical point. All of this is happening while Beijing holds diplomatic talks. The Guangzhou meetings on March 28th were described as productive. President Marcos said the energy crisis could provide impetus for both sides to reach an agreement on oil exploration. China responded by saying its door to dialogue remains open, but told the Philippines to demonstrate sincerity. Talking and building, negotiating and escalating. Using diplomacy as cover while creating irreversible facts on the water. This is the playbook. The question is, what's the counter? The answer, at least in part, arrives on April 20th. Balikatan 2026, the largest annual joint military exercise between the Philippines and the United States, is about to begin.
We will be focusing also more intently on cyber exercise.
And this year, it is unlike anything the region has ever seen. Armed Forces of the Philippines Chief of Staff General Romeo Brawner confirmed that despite the ongoing U.S. conflict with Iran, the exercise will go forward at full scale. We received the confirmation from Admiral Paparo himself. He said that this will still be the biggest Balikatan exercise despite the war going on in the Middle East. General Romeo Brawner, AFP Chief of Staff. But the real headline is Japan. For the first time since the end of World War II, 81 years, Japanese combat troops will set foot on Philippine soil. After 1945, for the very first time, we will again have Japanese combat troops on Philippine soil. Before, we were on opposite sides. This time, we find ourselves on the same side. General Romeo Brawner. Approximately 1,000 Japanese Self-Defense Forces personnel from the ground, maritime, and air branches will participate. Unlike previous years, where Japan sent only observers or humanitarian trainers, these troops will carry weapons and participate in defensive combat scenarios. The exercise will also include forces from Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and France, with 18 additional countries participating as observers. The Philippine Navy will deploy its most advanced warships, including the Jose Rizal class and Miguel Malvar class guided missile frigates. Balikatan 2026 will focus heavily on the Luzon Strait, the waterway between the Philippines and Taiwan that would serve as the front door for any Chinese military move toward the Pacific. The exercises will incorporate multi-domain operations, meaning land, sea, air, cyber, and space-based training conducted simultaneously. And there is one detail that Beijing will not ignore. The United States has committed to increasing deployments of advanced missile systems to the Philippines, including Typhoon mid-range capability launchers, ground-based platforms that fire Tomahawk cruise missiles with a range exceeding 1,700 kilometers. Deployed in northern Luzon, these missiles can reach deep into southern China. The Chinese embassy in Manila has already responded, calling the missile deployments extremely dangerous and warning they could trigger an arms race.
方一官认为，国家间开展军事安全合作，不应针对第三方或损害第三方利益，不应损害地区的和平稳定。
But here's what China's combat patrol at Scarborough and the near collision at Pag-asa reveal. Beijing may be trying to establish new facts before Balikatan begins. By escalating now, by normalizing warship-to-warship encounters, by conducting bomber overflights of disputed features, by building new islands, China is signaling that no exercise, no matter how large, will change its position. The question is whether this pre-exercise pressure is a sign of confidence or a sign of concern. Because when 20,000 troops from 4 allied nations begin operating on your doorstep, practicing the very scenarios you're trying to prevent, that's not something any military planner can ignore. So where does this leave us? The Philippines is caught between two forces. On one side, a neighbor with more than 370 warships, 73 submarines, 3 aircraft carriers, and a willingness to use them. On the other, an alliance system that is mobilizing at historic speed, but one that comes with its own risks and uncertainties. Every Philippine administration since 1994 has faced the same cycle: episodic crises, incremental expansionism, and diplomatic pauses that simply allowed China to consolidate gains before the next wave of escalation. The question isn't whether China will push further. It will. The real question is whether the Philippines and its allies can build a deterrence posture strong enough to raise the costs of that expansion beyond what Beijing is willing to pay. Balikatan 2026 is a piece of that puzzle. But it's not the whole answer. Exercises end. Forces go home. Chinese dredgers keep working. The 22 dredgers at Antelope Reef don't care about diplomatic statements or combat exercises. They work around the clock, pumping sand, creating land, building something permanent in waters that international law says they have no right to change. And that, ultimately, is the challenge. China plays the long game. It measures progress not in news cycles, but in square kilometers of reclaimed land, in the slow normalization of warship patrols over features that were once peaceful fishing grounds, in the gradual conditioning of the world to accept its presence as permanent. The only counter to a long game is a longer one. And that requires not just military exercises, but sustained political will, consistent investment in defense capabilities, and the kind of alliance coordination that doesn't fade when the cameras turn away. 18 days from now, Balikatan begins. The eyes of the world will be watching. The question is, will they still be watching on the 19th day? That's it for this video. If you found this analysis valuable, hit the like button. It makes a massive difference for the channel. Subscribe if you haven't, turn on the bell, and leave a comment below. Do you think Balikatan 2026 can actually deter China's expansion in the South China Sea? I want to hear your perspective. I'm working on a full breakdown of what Balikatan 2026 will actually look like when it starts on April 20th. The weapon systems, the scenarios, the strategic objectives, so make sure you don't miss that. Until next time, this is Indo-Pacific Report. Stay informed, stay sharp, and thank you for watching. feels different about Balikatan this year. For decades, the annual exercise between the Philippines and the United States was framed as routine alliance maintenance. Training cycles, interoperability drills, symbolic reassurance. Important, yes, but predictable. Balikatan 2026 doesn't feel predictable. It feels deliberate. With the Philippine Navy deploying its top-tier warships into the exercise, this is no longer just about procedural coordination. It is about visible readiness in a region where maritime tensions have become normalized. The South China Sea has seen rising confrontations in disputed waters, increased patrols by the China Coast Guard, and a steady escalation of gray zone tactics, water cannon incidents, aggressive shadowing, ramming maneuvers, and maritime militia swarming operations. Against that backdrop, the optics of frontline Philippine warships operating alongside U.S. forces matter. Balikatan 2026 is not just about training, it is about readiness, deterrence, and strategic messaging in contested waters. The timing is not accidental. Maritime pressure in areas like Second Thomas Shoal and Scarborough Shoal has intensified over the past 2 years. Philippine resupply missions have been challenged. Coast Guard vessels have faced obstruction. Surveillance activities have expanded. Every encounter carries the risk of miscalculation. In that environment, exercises become signals. When Manila commits its most capable naval assets, modern frigates, upgraded surface combatants, and integrated ISR support, it communicates seriousness. It tells partners that the alliance is operational, not ceremonial. It tells competitors that coordination is active, not theoretical. There is also an internal dimension. For the armed forces of the Philippines, fielding top warships in a high-visibility multinational drill reinforces modernization momentum. It demonstrates that recent investments are translating into deployable capability. Deterrence is not built in procurement documents. It is built in exercises, presence, and demonstrated coordination. And regionally, other Southeast Asian states are watching. Exercises of this scale influence strategic calculations far beyond bilateral ties. They shape perceptions of balance, reliability, and resolve. Balikatan 2026, therefore, is not an isolated event. It is part of a broader pattern: deepening defense integration, expanded access arrangements, improved maritime domain awareness, and increasingly synchronized operations in the Indo-Pacific. In contested waters, signaling matters. This year, the signal is clear. Balikatan 2026 isn't scaling down, it's scaling up, and that alone tells you something about the direction of the alliance. The exercise is scheduled for April-May 2026, right in the window when regional maritime activity tends to intensify. Participation numbers have steadily grown over the past few years. In 2023, roughly 17,600 personnel took part. In 2024, around 16,700. Based on trend lines and expanding operational scope, projections for 2026 point toward 18,000 or more combined forces. That's not routine maintenance. That's sustained expansion. The core participants remain the armed forces of the Philippines, the U.S. Navy, and the U.S. Marine Corps. But what gives this year additional weight is the likely presence of observers and participating partners from countries like Japan and Australia. Even as observers, their involvement reflects the widening security network forming in the Indo-Pacific. Balikatan is no longer purely bilateral in perception. It is increasingly viewed as a regional signaling platform. What makes 2026 particularly notable is the naval emphasis. The Philippine Navy is deploying its most advanced platforms. That includes the Jose Rizal, class-guided missile frigates, currently the most modern and capable surface combatants in Manila's fleet. These ships are equipped with anti-ship missile systems, modern surface warfare radars, and interoperable communications compatible with U.S. platforms. They are designed not just for patrol, but for high-end maritime operations. Alongside them are offshore patrol vessels and fast attack interdiction craft, expanding the tactical range of scenarios that can be exercised, from maritime interdiction and coastal defense to distributed surface operations. This combination matters. Exercises evolve over time. They can remain symbolic confidence-building measures, or they can transition toward operational credibility. The participation of top-tier warships suggests the latter. Balikatan 2026 is signaling a shift from procedural drills to credible warfighting preparation. Not because conflict is inevitable, but because readiness reduces uncertainty. And in contested waters, uncertainty is a risk. The message embedded in the scale and scope is straightforward: coordination is real, capability is improving, and alliance commitments are being exercised in practical terms, not just declared in joint statements. Balikatan 2026 isn't just a show of ships and numbers. It's the visible edge of something deeper, a long-term modernization push inside the armed forces of the Philippines. Under the revised AF modernization program, particularly the Horizon 2 and Horizon 3 phases, Manila has committed to a multi-billion-dollar capability upgrade. The focus is clear: strengthen maritime domain awareness, expand missile systems, and build a more credible fleet. For decades, the Philippine military was structured primarily for internal security. That era is over. The strategic center of gravity has shifted outward toward external defense and maritime deterrence. Layered on top of that modernization is the operational infrastructure provided through 9 enhanced defense cooperation agreement sites across the country. These locations expand logistical flexibility, pre-position equipment, and improve rapid deployment capacity. In practical terms, they reduce response time and increase operational endurance. Modernization without access is incomplete. Access without modernization is hollow. Together, they reinforce each other. Balikatan becomes the testing ground. This year's exercise includes live-fire maritime strike drills, the kind that move beyond scripted maneuvers into real capability demonstration. Combined amphibious landing exercises test coordination under complex conditions. Command and control interoperability simulations stress communications networks, decision-making speed, and joint operational coherence. Maritime domain awareness data sharing drills strengthen the intelligence backbone that underpins deterrence. None of this is accidental. It is structured integration. As AFP Chief of Staff Romeo Bronner Jr. has emphasized, our goal is seamless interoperability. When we operate together, we operate as one force. That line captures the core objective. Interoperability is not just compatibility of equipment. It is the compatibility of doctrine, timing, command structure, and trust. In modern maritime competition, fragmentation is vulnerable. Seamless coordination multiplies strength. Balikatan 2026 demonstrates that Philippine modernization is not occurring in isolation. It is being synchronized with alliance architecture. Ships are not just being acquired, they are being integrated. Radar systems are not just being installed, they are being networked. Exercises are not just rehearsals, they are calibration. And calibration in contested waters is deterrence. Balikatan 2026 carries weight far beyond training objectives. In today's strategic environment, exercises are messaging platforms, and this one speaks clearly.
Next day in Washington, a first step is taken in the direction demanded by Dewey as the United States and the Philippines sign a mutual defense treaty.
At the core is deterrence signaling under the 1951 Mutual Defense Treaty between the United States and the Philippines. Every time Philippine frontline warships operate alongside U.S. naval forces in complex drills, it reinforces a simple but powerful idea. The alliance is active, not theoretical. The treaty is not an archival document. It is operationalized through presence, coordination, and readiness. That matters especially because U.S. officials have consistently reiterated since 2019 that an armed attack on Philippine armed forces, public vessels, or aircraft in the Pacific, including in the South China Sea, would trigger mutual defense commitments. That clarity reduces ambiguity, and reduced ambiguity strengthens deterrence. Under President Ferdinand Marcos Jr., defense alignment with Washington has become more visible and more assertive. The expansion of EDCA sites, the acceleration of joint patrols, and the steady tempo of exercises reflect a strategic recalibration. Manila is signaling that maritime coercion will not go unanswered or unobserved. For Beijing, the message is layered. Since 2023, the Philippines has increased patrols in contested waters. Confrontations around Second Thomas Shoal and Scarborough Shoal have grown more frequent and more intense. Water cannon incidents, blocking maneuvers, and maritime militia presence have become recurring features of the operational landscape. Against that backdrop, Balikatan 2026 communicates resolve. It indicates that maritime pressure will not fracture alliance cohesion. It signals that Philippine forces are not isolated in disputed waters. And it demonstrates that coordination with the United States is expanding in sophistication, not contracting. Deterrence is ultimately about perception and calculation. If Beijing assesses that any escalation risks drawing in a prepared and interoperable alliance, the threshold for aggressive action rises. Balikatan 2026 therefore functions as both preparation and prevention. Preparation, because it builds operational capability. Prevention, because it shapes the strategic calculus of potential adversaries. Balikatan didn't start as what it is today. For years, it was heavily focused on internal security support. In 2015, the emphasis was counterterrorism. The operational profile was ground-centric. Jungle warfare drills, small unit coordination, stability operations. The alliance at that time was still oriented largely around internal threats and insurgency support. Then, 2020 hit. The pandemic forced adjustments across the board. Participation was reduced. Exercises were scaled back. Operational complexity was limited. Balikatan that year reflected global disruption more than strategic ambition. But something shifted after that. By 2023, the focus moved decisively toward territorial defense. Coastal defense missile systems were introduced into the exercise environment. That marked a conceptual transition from counterinsurgency to external deterrence. The messaging was clear. The Philippines was reorienting toward maritime defense. In 2024, the evolution continued. Integrated maritime operations took center stage. The first combined maritime strike drills signaled that coordination was no longer theoretical. Surface vessels, air assets, and command systems were being exercised together in more complex, high-end scenarios. The alliance was stress-testing interoperability. Now in 2026, the deployment of the Philippine Navy's most advanced warships marks another milestone. This is advanced naval integration. It is not a symbolic presence. It is high-value asset participation in joint operational environments. The pattern is unmistakable. Balikatan has transitioned from internal security support to full-spectrum territorial defense preparation. That shift reflects broader geopolitical realities. The threat environment changed. Maritime confrontations intensified. Strategic competition deepened. And the exercise adapted accordingly. Exercises evolve when strategic priorities evolve. Balikatan 2026 represents the culmination of that evolution. An alliance exercise calibrated for contested waters, maritime deterrence, and integrated warfighting readiness. Balikatan 2026 does not exist in isolation. It sits inside a widening web of Indo-Pacific security alignment that has been steadily tightening over the past several years. One of the most consequential developments has been increased trilateral coordination among the United States, the Philippines, and Japan. What was once largely bilateral cooperation has matured into structured maritime collaboration. Joint patrols conducted in 2023 and 2024 marked the first trilateral maritime patrols in the region, a significant precedent. It was not just symbolism, it was operational signaling that like-minded maritime states are prepared to coordinate presence in contested waters. Japan's expanding security role under its evolving defense posture has made this trilateral axis more credible. Maritime domain awareness sharing, Coast Guard coordination, and naval presence operations now overlap in ways that would have been politically sensitive a decade ago. Australia's role has also grown more visible. Canberra has increased participation in Philippine exercises, reflecting its deeper engagement under its Indo-Pacific strategic framework. The involvement of Australia adds geographic breadth and reinforces that maritime security in Southeast Asia is not a narrow bilateral issue. It is a regional stability concern. All of this aligns with Washington's broader Indo-Pacific strategy: reinforce alliances, deepen interoperability, and create a networked security architecture rather than isolated bilateral hubs. The Philippines is increasingly positioned as a frontline maritime state within that architecture. Geographically, the Luzon Strait and the West Philippine Sea are central. The Luzon Strait is a critical choke point linking the South China Sea to the broader Pacific. The West Philippine Sea remains the epicenter of maritime friction. Securing these corridors is not just about sovereignty, it is about freedom of navigation, sea lane integrity, and deterrent stability. Balikatan 2026, viewed in this context, becomes more than an annual exercise. It becomes a node in a larger strategic alignment. The pattern suggests institutionalization, not episodic cooperation, but structured coordination designed for long-term deterrence and maritime order maintenance. In strategic terms, the alliance is no longer operating alone. It is operating within a widening coalition framework. First, capability upgrade. The Philippine Navy is no longer operating purely as a constabulary or patrol-centric maritime force. Through sustained modernization under the revised AFP modernization program and increasingly complex joint exercises, it is transitioning toward a credible, deterrent fleet. The integration of guided missile frigates, interoperable command systems, and live-fire maritime drills signals movement from presence-based enforcement to warfighting-capable deterrence. That evolution fundamentally alters how Manila projects maritime resolve. Second, alliance reinforcement. Defense cooperation between the Philippines and the United States is arguably at its strongest level in decades. The operationalization of the 1951 Mutual Defense Treaty, the expansion of Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement sites, and the tempo of joint maritime activities demonstrate institutional depth. This is not episodic engagement. It is structured, sustained alignment with strategic clarity. Third, regional stability. Exercises of this scale function as deterrence signaling mechanisms. They reinforce freedom of navigation principles and communicate that coercive behavior in contested waters will be observed and counterbalanced. Stability in the Indo-Pacific is not maintained through rhetoric alone. It is maintained through readiness, interoperability, and visible alliance cohesion. Fourth, escalation management. High-intensity drills improve crisis response coordination. When forces train together under complex scenarios, maritime strike simulations, amphibious operations, and joint command exercises, they reduce miscalculation risk during real-world incidents. Shared operating procedures and integrated communications lower the probability of confusion under pressure. That is not just preparation for conflict, it is insurance against accidental escalation. Balikatan 2026 reflects a maturing alliance. The trajectory from counterterrorism support to advanced naval integration demonstrates strategic adaptation to a shifting maritime threat environment. It shows commitment to a rules-based maritime order in which international law, alliance obligations, and sovereign rights are reinforced through operational credibility rather than declaratory policy alone. It also places the Philippine Navy at the center of a broader regional deterrence architecture. Manila is no longer a peripheral actor in Indo-Pacific security dynamics. It is increasingly a frontline maritime state embedded within a networked alliance structure. In an increasingly contested Indo-Pacific, Balikatan 2026 is less about rehearsing war and more about preventing one.
If you found this analysis valuable, share your perspective in the comments. Your insights help deepen the conversation and sharpen our understanding of evolving regional dynamics. Thank you, and we will see you soon in our next geopolitical discussion.
China is accelerating its nuclear buildup at a pace that is also reshaping the global balance of power, it seems.
It is the first time that China has so clearly stated its military plans and ambitions in the last 2 years, and it is focusing its attention far at sea, far from its shores.
I mean, China has grown the islands to 2,000 acres in the last 18 months. That's a lot of space that they've grown. They're throwing sand up into these atolls and then building military airstrips on top of those.
What if the next major global crisis doesn't begin with a missile launch, but with concrete being poured onto tiny reefs in the middle of the sea? That question suddenly feels a lot less hypothetical this week. Fresh satellite images and defense assessments show that China is steadily expanding military infrastructure across several artificial islands in the South China Sea. Facilities analysts say could support advanced missile systems and potentially nuclear-capable strategic assets. For most people scrolling through the news, it might sound like just another geopolitical headline. But look a little closer, and it feels different. Bigger. Almost like watching pieces of a much larger chessboard quietly fall into place. And here's the unsettling part. The South China Sea doesn't look dramatic on a map. Just scattered reefs, shallow waters, and a few tiny specks of land. Yet every year, roughly $3.37 trillion worth of global trade moves through these waters. Oil tankers, cargo ships, energy routes, an entire artery of the global economy flows through this stretch of ocean. If something goes wrong here, it doesn't stay regional for long. It ripples outward, touching supply chains, energy markets, and even grocery prices on the other side of the planet. Take Mischief Reef, for example. A decade ago, it was little more than a submerged coral formation. Fishermen passed by it without thinking twice. Today, it has long airstrips, hardened shelters, radar systems, and missile-capable facilities. The transformation is so dramatic that one Southeast Asian naval officer once joked privately that a reef turned into an aircraft carrier. Except, it wasn't really a joke. This is where the tension begins to feel personal for the region. China's sweeping claim to most of the South China Sea, marked by the now famous 9-dash line, overlaps directly with the maritime zones of the Philippines, Vietnam, Malaysia, Brunei, and Taiwan. For fishermen, coast guards, and naval patrols operating there, the dispute isn't theoretical. It's something they encounter face-to-face on the water, sometimes intense standoffs, sometimes with water cannons, warning shots, or aggressive maneuvering between vessels. Meanwhile, outside powers are stepping in more frequently. The United States and its partners regularly conduct freedom of navigation operations, sailing warships through contested waters to challenge what they see as excessive maritime claims. Every patrol, every flyover, every radar lock adds another layer of friction to an already crowded strategic space. As Admiral John Aquilino, the commander of United States Indo-Pacific Command, once put it bluntly, the South China Sea is not just a regional issue. It's a global concern with implications for freedom of navigation and international law. And that's really the heart of the story. Because what's unfolding in the South China Sea isn't simply about islands or even military bases. It's about who sets the rules in one of the world's most important waterways. It's about whether international law still holds weight when major powers disagree. And increasingly, it's about whether a quiet competition for strategic dominance might one day turn into something much harder to contain. So the real question isn't just what China is building in the South China Sea. The bigger question is what it might be preparing for and how the rest of the region and the world will respond. The South China Sea sits at the crossroads of geography, commerce, and power. On the map, it may appear like a wide stretch of blue connecting Southeast Asia to the Pacific. But in reality, it functions as one of the world's most important maritime highways. Every day, enormous container ships and oil tankers move through these waters, linking the factories of East Asia with the markets of Europe and the energy producers of the Middle East. It is difficult to exaggerate how vital this route has become to the global economy. Entire supply chains depend on it. A disruption here would not just affect nearby countries, it would echo across global markets almost immediately. But trade routes are only one part of the story. Beneath the seabed of the South China Sea lies another powerful incentive that keeps regional tensions simmering: natural resources. Energy assessments suggest that the seabed may contain around 11 billion barrels of oil and nearly 190 trillion cubic feet of natural gas. For countries with fast-growing economies and rising energy demands, those numbers are hard to ignore. Control over even a portion of these resources could reshape national energy strategies and reduce dependence on foreign imports. In many ways, the sea is not just a waterway, it is also a potential energy reserve waiting beneath layers of sediment. Then there is the human dimension, which often gets overlooked in high-level strategic debates. The South China Sea is one of the most productive fishing grounds on Earth, supplying roughly 10 to 12% of the global fish catch. Millions of people across Southeast Asia depend on these waters for their livelihoods. For coastal communities in places like Vietnam, the Philippines, and Malaysia, fishing here is not about geopolitics, it is about daily survival. Yet fishermen often find themselves on the front lines of maritime disputes, encountering foreign coast guards, maritime militias, or naval patrols in increasingly crowded waters. The roots of the territorial dispute stretch back decades. China's sweeping claim over most of the South China Sea is illustrated through the so-called Nine-Dash Line, a boundary that first appeared on Chinese maps in the late 1940s. Beijing argues that this line reflects historical rights and centuries of Chinese activity in the region. However, several Southeast Asian countries strongly reject that interpretation. Instead, they base their claims on modern international maritime law, particularly the framework established under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, which defines exclusive economic zones extending 200 nautical miles from coastal states.
The new government here in Manila is grappling with what might be called catastrophic success. What comes next is obviously going to be a delicate balancing act. It is a time for cool heads.
The legal clash between historical claims and international law came to a dramatic moment in 2016. That year, an international tribunal under the Permanent Court of Arbitration ruled overwhelmingly in favor of the Philippines in a case challenging China's maritime claims. The decision concluded that the Nine-Dash Line had no legal basis under international law, and that many of the disputed features could not generate expansive maritime zones. Beijing, however, rejected the ruling outright and has continued to assert its position, creating a situation where legal interpretation and geopolitical reality remain deeply at odds. While legal debates continue, developments on the ground, or more precisely, on the water, have moved forward rapidly. Over the past decade, China has carried out extensive land reclamation projects across several reefs and shoals in both the Spratleys Islands and the Paracel Islands. What were once scattered coral outcrops have been transformed into large artificial islands with runways long enough for military aircraft, deep water ports capable of hosting naval vessels, and sophisticated radar installations. These facilities are not merely symbolic outposts, they represent a permanent and expanding military footprint in the region. Alongside the infrastructure has come a steady deployment of military assets. Fighter jets, surface-to-air missile systems, and naval patrol vessels have been observed operating from several of these installations. From a strategic perspective, These bases extend China's surveillance and operational reach across much of the South China Sea. If you zoom in on recent satellite imagery of the South China Sea, something striking appears. Reefs that once barely broke the surface of the water now look like small military cities. Concrete runways stretch across artificial islands. Radar towers stand like watchful sentries. And deep water harbors are carved into places that not long ago were just coral formations surrounded by fishermen's boats. Over the past few years, China has quietly but steadily expanded these installations, turning them into some of the most strategically positioned military outposts in the region. Two of the most significant locations are Fiery Cross Reef and Subi Reef. What used to be isolated reefs have been transformed into heavily fortified bases with long airstrips, hardened shelters, and large infrastructure capable of supporting sustained military operations. Analysts studying satellite imagery say some of the newly reinforced structures appear designed to store or deploy advanced missile systems, including platforms capable of carrying nuclear-capable intermediate-range missiles. In several images released in recent years, thick concrete facilities and underground-style structures suggest preparations for assets that require both protection and rapid launch capability. The expansion has not been limited to building new bases. China has also been upgrading facilities that were already operational. Runways have been extended and strengthened so they can accommodate larger aircraft, while port facilities have been expanded to handle bigger warships. The effect is noticeable when you look at the scale of these installations today. They are no longer simple forward outposts, but rather fully functioning military hubs. Surveillance technology has also become a central feature of these bases. Advanced radar systems, high-altitude drones, and increasingly sophisticated monitoring tools now allow Chinese forces to observe vast portions of the surrounding sea and airspace. A particularly important node in this surveillance network is the growing military complex on Hainan Island. Located at the northern edge of the South China Sea, the island has long served as a key base for China's naval and air forces. Recent upgrades have added powerful radar installations capable of scanning hundreds of kilometers across the region. In practical terms, that means aircraft movements, naval patrols, and even routine shipping activity can be tracked with far greater precision than before. For strategists, that kind of visibility dramatically strengthens situational awareness in contested waters. Alongside infrastructure expansion has come a clear push to strengthen naval and air capabilities operating in the area. China has deployed increasingly advanced platforms, including the Type 093 submarine, which enhances underwater deterrence and patrol capacity. Surface operations have also grown more prominent with the presence of the aircraft carrier Shandong, capable of projecting air power far from the mainland. In the skies above the region, China's fifth-generation Chengdu J-20 fighter jets represent another step toward modernizing the country's military reach. Military activity itself has also intensified. Exercises in the region have become more frequent and more complex, often involving coordinated naval and air maneuvers. Some drills reportedly simulate scenarios involving potential confrontation with outside powers, particularly the United States, whose naval forces regularly operate in nearby waters. These exercises serve multiple purposes. They train Chinese forces for high-intensity operations, signal strategic resolve to rivals, and demonstrate China's growing ability to project power across one of the world's most contested maritime regions. Taken together, these developments suggest something larger than routine military modernization. They point to a deliberate effort to build a network of forward positions capable of monitoring, controlling, and if necessary, defending China's interests across the South China Sea. For countries in the region, and for global powers watching closely, the question is no longer whether China is strengthening its presence there. The real debate now centers on how far that expansion might go, and what it could mean for the balance of power in Asia's most strategically sensitive waters. When you step back and look at the scale of China's construction across the South China Sea, it's hard not to ask the obvious question: why invest so much in remote reefs and contested waters? The answer isn't just about territory. It's about influence, security, and the long game of global power. For Beijing, These islands are not random military outposts, they are strategic footholds in one of the most important maritime regions on Earth. One of the clearest motivations is regional power projection. The South China Sea has increasingly become a stage where major powers signal strength and resolve. For China, expanding military facilities there allows it to extend its defensive perimeter far beyond the mainland coastline. From Beijing's perspective, this helps counterbalance the presence of foreign naval forces that regularly operate in the region. Warships from the United States and its allies conduct patrols meant to challenge expansive maritime claims, and Chinese strategists see forward bases as a way to maintain constant visibility and, if necessary, deterrence against those movements. At the same time, these installations reinforce China's territorial claims. The scattered reefs and islands of the South China Sea may appear insignificant individually, but collectively they shape control over vast surrounding waters. Another powerful driver is economic security. China is the world's largest energy importer, and much of that energy flows through the sea lanes that cut across the South China Sea. Tankers carrying crude oil from the Middle East and Africa travel along these routes before reaching Chinese ports. Analysts often note that roughly 70% of China's imported oil passes through these waters, making them one of the country's most critical supply arteries. From Beijing's standpoint, ensuring that these shipping lanes remain secure, especially during geopolitical crises, is a matter of national survival. Beneath the sea itself lies yet another strategic prize. Geological surveys suggest that the seabed may hold substantial deposits of oil, natural gas, and potentially rare earth minerals. Control over these resources would strengthen China's long-term energy security while reducing vulnerability to external suppliers. In an era where energy access often shapes geopolitical competition, the prospect of untapped reserves beneath the South China Sea adds another layer of strategic urgency to the dispute. Domestic politics also plays a role in shaping China's approach. The leadership of the Chinese Communist Party places strong emphasis on national unity, sovereignty, and the idea of restoring China's historical status as a major power. Demonstrating control over disputed maritime territories fits naturally into that narrative. Military modernization, visible through advanced aircraft, naval deployments, and fortified island bases, reinforces the image of a country that has regained both confidence and capability on the global stage. For Chinese leadership, a stronger military presence in the region also serves as a message to domestic audiences. It signals that the government is actively protecting national interests and responding to external pressures. In that sense, infrastructure projects in distant reefs become symbols of national strength as much as they are strategic assets. This connection between military strength and national development has been openly emphasized by Xi Jinping, who has repeatedly linked defense modernization with China's broader rise as a global power. As he stated in 2019, a strong military underpins China's peaceful rise. The remark captures a central idea in Beijing's strategic thinking. Stability and prosperity, in China's view, depend on the ability to defend national interests with credible power. Seen through that lens, the expansion in the South China Sea is not an isolated policy. It is part of a broader strategy aimed at securing vital trade routes, reinforcing territorial claims, and projecting influence across the Indo-Pacific. Whether this approach will stabilize the region or deepen strategic rivalry, however, remains one of the most pressing questions shaping the future of Asian security. As China's military footprint across the South China Sea has expanded, reactions from the rest of the region have been immediate and sometimes uneasy. Countries in Southeast Asia are watching developments closely because the dispute isn't happening somewhere far away. It's unfolding right on their maritime doorstep. For several members of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, the growing presence of Chinese bases has triggered a mix of diplomatic protest, cautious dialogue, and quiet military preparation. Governments across the region have repeatedly called for negotiations and adherence to international maritime law. Yet behind the scenes, many are also strengthening their own security capabilities. Vietnam, for instance, has steadily expanded and modernized its Coast Guard and naval patrol capacity, aiming to better monitor its maritime zones. The Philippines has taken a slightly different route by deepening defense cooperation with the United States, allowing greater coordination between the two militaries in response to growing tensions in disputed waters. For smaller states, the challenge is delicate. They must defend their maritime rights while avoiding escalation with a far more powerful neighbor. Outside powers have also become increasingly involved. The United States, which sees the South China Sea as vital to global maritime freedom, continues to conduct freedom of navigation operations to challenge what it considers excessive territorial claims. American naval deployments in the region often operate alongside partners such as Japan and Australia, signaling that the issue is no longer purely regional, but part of a broader Indo-Pacific security landscape. One notable example came in 2023, when the aircraft carrier Ronald Reagan sailed through the South China Sea as part of a broader show of deterrence and reassurance to allies. These patrols and exercises increasingly intersect with emerging security frameworks like the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, commonly known as the Quad, which brings together the United States, Japan, India, and Australia. Although the Quad is not a formal military alliance, its growing cooperation in maritime security reflects a shared concern about maintaining open sea lanes and balancing China's expanding influence. At the legal level, international institutions have attempted to provide a framework for managing these disputes. The United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea remains the primary legal basis for defining maritime rights and exclusive economic zones. In theory, it offers a clear structure for resolving overlapping claims. In practice, however, enforcement remains difficult when major powers reject rulings or interpret legal provisions differently. As international law expert Philippe Sands once observed, international law is clear, but compliance remains a challenge. His remark captures the frustrating gap between legal principles and geopolitical realities. The developments unfolding in the South China Sea illustrate how geography, economics, and power politics can intersect in ways that shape global security. China's expanding military presence, including infrastructure capable of supporting advanced missile systems, reflects a strategy driven by regional influence, protection of vital trade routes, and domestic political considerations. For neighboring states and global powers alike, the implications are far-reaching. Security dynamics are shifting, economic stability is potentially at stake, and diplomatic relationships across the Indo-Pacific are being recalibrated in response to these changes. None of these developments exist in isolation. Each is part of a larger strategic transformation underway in the region. For now, the South China Sea remains one of the defining geopolitical hotspots of the 21st century. What happens there will not only influence the security architecture of Asia, but also shape the broader dynamics of global power in the decades ahead.
If you found this analysis valuable, share your perspective in the comments. Your insights help deepen the conversation and sharpen our understanding of evolving regional dynamics. Thank you, and we will see you soon in our next geopolitical discussion.
Commander, Task Force 80, arriving.
And to ensure that we are ready for the high-end tactical fight, and if need.
Nothing rolled in with fanfare. No dramatic base openings. No headline-grabbing troop numbers. Just a short confirmation, almost easy to miss. The U.S. Army now maintains a rotational force in the Philippines. Quiet, technical, bureaucratic sounding, and strategically massive. Because this isn't just another exercise cycle. It's a shift in posture. For years, U.S. land power in the Philippines came and went with drills, Balikatan, joint training, temporary deployments that packed up and left. What's emerging now is different. Institutionalized rotation, persistent presence without permanent basing, Army units flowing in and out, but never really leaving the chessboard. Low visibility, high consequence. That matters because land forces change the equation. Naval and air power signal reach. Army forces signal intent, staying power, and denial. They're about holding terrain, controlling choke points, and shaping escalation thresholds. In the context of the first island chain, that's not a footnote, it's architecture. This quiet expansion effectively weaves U.S. ground forces into the Philippines' defense landscape, not as guests, but as a recurring feature. It blurs the line between exercise and posture, between presence and permanence. And it does so without triggering the political backlash that large fixed bases once did. The timing isn't accidental. China's military pressure on Taiwan is intensifying. The South China Sea is more militarized than ever. The first island chain, once a conceptual line on a map, is now being physically reinforced, node by node. The Philippines sits at the hinge of that chain. And land power at the hinge changes how deterrence works. So the real question isn't whether this is escalation. It's whether this marks the moment deterrence in Southeast Asia stopped being episodic and started becoming structural. How quiet the U.S. Army rotation reshapes the balance between China, Taiwan, and the South China Sea? And what does it mean when the first island chain stops being theory and starts being staffed? The Army rotational force Philippines is deliberately low profile, but that doesn't make it insignificant. Unlike traditional deployments with parades, press briefings, or unit roll calls, this rotation is framed as a lean, headquarters-level element with supporting forces flowing in and out. On paper, it looks modest. In practice, it establishes a persistent footprint that quietly changes deterrence calculus. Command falls under a lieutenant colonel, led headquarters, signaling that this is a standing leadership node rather than a temporary task force. That level of command is small enough to remain discreet, but senior enough to ensure continuity across rotations. A RFP is embedded within Task Force, Philippines, which allows knowledge, coordination, and operational memory to persist even as personnel rotate. It's a structural presence disguised as a temporary deployment. The force also complements the Marine Rotational Force, Southeast Asia, rather than duplicating it. Where the Marines focus on expeditionary and littoral operations, the Army brings logistical depth, command and control capability, and operational sustainment. This combination strengthens the U.S.-Philippine partnership while keeping the footprint light, a smart mix of presence, capability, and ambiguity. The opacity of ARFP isn't an oversight. It's deliberate. By withholding details on size, equipment, or mission profile, the U.S. leverages uncertainty as a strategic tool. Observers and potential adversaries must assume the force could scale, support contingency operations, or coordinate rapidly with other U.S. rotational elements. In essence, rotational becomes permanent in practice, a quiet signal that U.S. land power is now a recurring feature in the Philippines without provoking overt political friction. Task Force Philippines was officially announced in October 2025 as the organizational spine supporting rotational deployments like ARFP. Its creation wasn't about a flashy troop buildup, it was about structure, planning, and readiness. The task force exists to improve joint operational planning, enable rapid crisis response, and synchronize U.S. Philippine ground operations across a range of contingencies. Strategically, this is a quiet but profound shift. Where alliance coordination used to be episodic and ad hoc, task force, Philippines institutionalizes it, creating a standing mechanism for planning, communication, and operational integration. It embeds U.S. land warfare expertise directly into Philippine defense architecture, enhancing interoperability and allowing both nations to respond faster to regional contingencies. The move also sends a subtle but clear signal. The U.S. is committed to the Philippines long-term, yet without the political complications of permanent base expansion. By establishing a rotational force within a permanent planning structure, the task force reinforces deterrence, strengthens bilateral ties, and quietly militarizes the first island chain without headlines. The strategic weight of the Philippines isn't abstract, it's geography made manifest. Situated along the first island chain, the archipelago serves as both a forward shield for Taiwan and a southern anchor for maritime denial in the South China Sea. Think of it like Okinawa or Guam, a mix of natural terrain, proximity to contested waters, and lines of communication that make it indispensable for projecting influence and shaping regional calculations. Breaking it down further, certain areas carry outsized importance. Northern Luzon sits directly in the path of any Taiwan contingency spillover, providing early staging, observation, and coordination points. Palawan anchors the southern edge of the South China Sea, a hotspot for territorial disputes and maritime pressure points. Meanwhile, Mindanao offers ISR potential, a legacy of counterinsurgency infrastructure, and the possibility of drone basing, a flexible, persistent surveillance platform that extends reach across the region. In short, the Philippines isn't just another host nation. It's a strategic hinge in the first island chain, one that shapes deterrence, maritime access, and rapid response options for the U.S. while subtly constraining potential adversaries. Geography doesn't change, and that's why presence here carries disproportionate weight. Since 2022, the U.S. has quietly layered advanced army systems into the Philippines, reshaping what rotational presence actually means. Mobile precision fires like HIMARS bring rapid, long-range strike capability. Patriot air and missile defense adds a protective umbrella against aerial threats. Mid-range strike options, including Typhoon systems with Tomahawk capability, extend deterrence far beyond the shoreline. On the intelligence side, Gray Eagle MQ-9 ISR platforms provide persistent surveillance, mapping potential hotspots in real time. This isn't just about hardware. It reflects a doctrinal shift. U.S. Army deployments here are moving from counter-terrorism assistance to state-on-state deterrence. Land forces are now integrated into maritime conflict planning, functioning as a key node in regional defense networks rather than a supporting afterthought. The Army, once secondary to Navy and Air Force operations in the Indo-Pacific, is now a central actor, capable of shaping deterrence, controlling key terrain, and providing options that extend the first island chain's strategic depth. Presence, capability, and integration together mean that the Philippines is no longer just a training ground, it's a forward operating platform for multi-domain deterrence, quietly signaling U.S. resolve while maintaining a low-profile footprint. The presence of U.S. Army rotational forces in the Philippines hasn't gone unnoticed in Beijing. Official statements frame these deployments as destabilizing, painting a narrative that U.S. land power is creeping closer to Taiwan and expanding influence in the South China Sea. Analysts note the linkage between rotational deployments and broader Chinese concerns over maritime security and regional balance. Each missile battery, ISR drone, or HIMARS launcher may seem small individually, but together they create a strategic picture that complicates Chinese calculations. The effect is deliberate. By quietly embedding capable army units, the U.S. raises the cost of coercion against Manila and forces the PLA to account for scenarios they previously treated as low priority. Operational planning becomes more complex. and the risk of miscalculation rises in any crisis. This is the essence of rotational presence, low-profile deployment with high strategic leverage, signaling deterrence without overt provocation. Manila's strategic calculus. For the Philippines, the calculus is clear but delicate. Ongoing South China Sea confrontations, the potential spillover from any Taiwan crisis, and the need to protect its exclusive economic zone demand credible deterrence. Rotational U.S. land forces give Manila more than reassurance. They provide a practical ability to project defense and secure key terrain without fully ceding sovereignty. Domestically, the armed forces of the Philippines are making moves of their own. The activation of the 1st Land-based Missile Battalion reflects growing recognition of integrated territorial defense. Simultaneously, joint exercises and interoperability programs with U.S. forces are institutionalizing skills, command protocols, and rapid response capabilities. Manila's challenge is balancing the benefits of this partnership with sovereignty sensitivities, ensuring that the U.S. presence strengthens rather than politicizes domestic security. Even quiet deployments carry risks. Fixed missile batteries are vulnerable to preemptive strikes or sabotage, and rotational units must navigate sustainment, logistics, and command and control complexities in crisis scenarios. Missteps in coordination or timing could have outsized consequences in a densely militarized maritime theater. Political dynamics add another layer. Public perception of foreign troops on Philippine soil can stir backlash, and ASEAN neighbors may view these moves as militarization of the region, complicating diplomatic balance. Finally, the sheer proximity of forces to sensitive zones in the South China Sea increases the risk of accidental escalation with China if miscommunication occurs. These constraints underline the delicate dance of deterrence. Capability must be credible, yet visible restraint is essential. These developments are reshaping the Indo-Pacific security architecture. The U.S. Army's quiet rotational presence normalizes land power in maritime Asia, moving it from a theoretical option to an operational reality. For the Philippines, this positions the archipelago as a central node in regional deterrence, transforming it from a peripheral ally to a frontline stakeholder. Rotational forces emerge as the preferred model for forward presence, flexible, scalable, and politically manageable, while providing tangible deterrence against coercive actors. Long-term, these deployments ripple across contingency planning for Taiwan and other flashpoints. Even modest formations, quietly deployed, can create strategic effects far larger than their size suggests, shaping adversary calculations, protecting alliance credibility, and embedding the Philippines at the center of U.S. Indo-Pacific strategy. The Army Rotational Force, Philippines signals more than a temporary deployment. It marks enduring U.S. intent. The focus has shifted from symbolic exercises to operational readiness, with forces capable of responding to crises, supporting allies, and deterring aggression. For Manila, the message is clear. The Philippines is no longer a backwater ally. It sits on the front line of a regional balance of power struggle, hosting capabilities that quietly amplify deterrence without provoking overt conflict. In the end, the strategic takeaway is striking. Small formations, discreetly rotated, can have outsized consequences. Presence, integration, and capability combine to create a force multiplier effect, proving that in modern geopolitics, the quietest moves often leave the deepest imprint.
Three, 2, 1, fire!
Sir, yes, sir!
What does it take for a country made up of more than 7,600 islands to defend itself in the age of great power competition? The Philippines is finding out, and the story of 2016 to 2026 shows a dramatic pivot from internal security toward maritime deterrence. Over the past decade, Manila has undertaken one of its most ambitious expansions of military bases and maritime infrastructure, signaling that safeguarding its seas is no longer optional, it is central to national survival. The urgency is real. In early 2026, reports highlighted accelerated construction at strategic coastal facilities in Palawan and Zambales, as well as upgrades to radar and naval support stations across the archipelago. These bases are not just concrete and barbed wire. They are the backbone of the country's ability to monitor, respond, and project presence in its own waters. Imagine a Philippine Navy patrol vessel, once constrained to local waters, now able to rapidly move from the Sulu Sea to the South China Sea, fueled and supported by forward-deployed infrastructure. The difference is measured in hours, not days, a vital advantage in crises. Geography is destiny. With a coastline exceeding 36,000 kilometers and sitting astride the South China Sea, Sulu and Celebes Seas, and the northern approach to the Pacific via the Taiwan Strait, the Philippines is literally at the crossroads of regional security. These are not distant abstractions. They are active trade routes, contested fishing grounds, and potential flashpoints where naval incidents can escalate in hours. Protecting them is both a matter of sovereignty and of keeping global commerce flowing. Manila's approach mirrors lessons learned from other archipelagic or littoral states. Indonesia, for example, has long invested in distributed maritime bases to patrol the sprawling archipelago of the Maluku and Sulawesi regions. Vietnam, facing similar South China Sea pressures, has fortified coastal garrisons and radar networks to monitor Chinese movements. Yet the Philippines' strategy is uniquely shaped by its combination of geography, alliance dynamics, and historical resource limitations, requiring a delicate balance between modernization, sustainability, and operational reach. This decade-long investment is not just about hardware, it is a statement of intent. It tells both domestic audiences and external powers that the Philippines is serious about defending its maritime rights under UNCLOS, expanding maritime domain awareness, and improving the mobility and readiness of its forces. In a region where gray zone tactics, Coast Guard harassment, and strategic signaling are daily realities, the expansion of military bases is more than construction. It is a concrete shift in the country's strategic posture, and a signal that Manila is moving from reaction to proactive deterrence. For much of the post-war period, the Philippines' defense posture reflected domestic priorities rather than maritime imperatives. Military bases were chronically underfunded, naval and air capabilities were limited, and the Armed Forces of the Philippines, AFP, focused overwhelmingly on counterinsurgency operations against domestic groups. While this approach suited internal security needs, it left the country ill-prepared to enforce sovereignty over its vast maritime domain, including contested areas like the Spratleys Islands, Scarborough Shoal, and the Philippine Rise, Benham Rise. By the mid-2010s, the strategic costs of this land-centric approach became painfully clear. Rising regional pressures accelerated the sense of urgency. China's expansive 9-line claims challenged the Philippines' maritime rights, while repeated incidents, vessel harassment, ramming, and the use of water cannons demonstrated Manila's limited ability to respond effectively. The militarization of artificial islands shifted the regional balance of power,
further exposing strategic gaps. As a senior Philippine Navy officer reflected, "We were defending a maritime state with a land-centric force, a blunt admission that highlighted decades of structural neglect." The strategic reorientation that began in 2016 marked a turning point. Key inflection points included the full operationalization of the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement with the United States, which opened Philippine facilities to rotational U.S. forces, and the acceleration of the AFP modernization program. The focus shifted decisively toward territorial defense, maritime security, and interoperability with allies, signaling a fundamental rethinking of the country's defense priorities. The base expansion effort was guided by three overarching objectives. First, to safeguard the exclusive economic zone, which spans 200 nautical miles and is rich in fisheries, hydrocarbons, and seabed resources. Expanded coastal radar networks, ISR platforms, and patrol coverage were designed to counter illegal fishing, smuggling, and gray zone incursions. Second, the initiative aimed to strengthen national defense and deterrence. By building infrastructure for rapid deployment, distributed basing, and sustainment, Manila sought to increase the operational cost of coercion without provoking escalation dominance. Dispersed bases reduce vulnerabilities and ensure forces can respond quickly across multiple maritime fronts. Third, the expansion sought to enhance regional monitoring and allied integration. Strategic choke points like the Luzon Strait and Balabac Strait were prioritized, allowing Manila to conduct continuous surveillance and enable joint operations with allies, turning Philippine territory into a hub for regional coordination.
Palawan emerged as the linchpin of Western maritime security. While permanent installations on disputed features remain limited, Manila significantly improved resupply and forward operating capabilities, reinforced its presence around 2nd Thomas Shoal, and upgraded Antonio Bautista Air Base as a Western air hub. For example, resupply missions to the BRP Sierra Madre continue despite Chinese pressure, made possible by enhanced logistics and air support from Palawan. Northern bases now serve a dual purpose: monitoring the South China Sea and maintaining contingency awareness near the Taiwan Strait. EDCA sites in Cagayan and Isabela provide early warning capacity and temporary access for Allied exercises. Recent drills saw U.S. anti-ship missile systems deployed temporarily near northern corridors, demonstrating the deterrent value of geography combined with forward-positioned infrastructure. Balabac Island anchors the southern gateway to the West Philippine Sea and supports patrols near Mischief Reef and transit routes towards Sabah. Manila plans up to 28 forward operating bases nationwide to enable distributed maritime operations, ensuring the southern approaches are continuously monitored and operationally ready. The expansion of Philippine military bases has been paired with a comprehensive modernization of technological and operational capabilities, reflecting the country's shift from a reactive land-focused force to a proactive maritime power. Central to this effort is the expansion of intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance infrastructure. Coastal radar networks have been upgraded and extended to previously under-monitored areas, enabling real-time tracking of vessels and improved situational awareness across the entire archipelago. Maritime patrol aircraft now operate from forward bases such as Palawan and Antonio Bautista Air Base, while unmanned aerial vehicles supplement manned patrols, providing persistent surveillance in contested waters. These upgrades are integrated into improved command and control networks, allowing faster decision-making and coordination between naval, air, and Coast Guard units. Training and operational readiness have also evolved. Over 500 combined and joint exercises were scheduled for 2026 alone, reflecting a dramatic increase in operational tempo. These activities span multi-domain operations, including amphibious drills, missile defense simulations, and humanitarian assistance/disaster relief missions.
Yesterday, because I was like, oh, they're in trouble for it. What are they doing?
Providing a realistic training environment for rapid deployment and joint coordination. For instance, the Balikatan exercises, historically focused on disaster response, now simulate complex maritime conflict scenarios, integrating air, sea, and land components to test interoperability, logistical readiness, and crisis management under pressure. Infrastructure modernization complements these technological and training efforts. Runways at key bases were extended to accommodate heavy-lift aircraft, enabling rapid deployment of personnel, equipment, and humanitarian aid across the archipelago. Fuel and logistics storage facilities were hardened to reduce vulnerability to attacks or natural disasters, and forward command centers were established to sustain long-duration operations in remote regions. This combination of advanced ISR, rigorous training, and resilient infrastructure ensures that the Philippines' maritime posture is credible, responsive, and sustainable, even in the face of gray zone challenges or sudden crises. The strategic stakes of the Philippines' maritime domain cannot be overstated. Roughly one-third of global maritime trade, valued between $3 to $5 trillion annually, passes through the South China Sea. The expansion of forward bases ensures continuous patrols of these critical waterways, providing faster detection and response to incursions or illegal activities. It also allows the Philippines to enforce UNCLOS-based rights more effectively, including safeguarding fisheries, monitoring resource exploration, and protecting maritime sovereignty. Strategically, these upgrades raise the threshold for potential adversaries. By dispersing forces across key geographic points, Manila increases the cost and complexity of coercive action, strengthening deterrence without resorting to aggressive posturing. The forward-deployed infrastructure anchors freedom of navigation operations, reassures commercial stakeholders, and contributes to regional norms of collective security. Rather than provoking conflict, this posture communicates preparedness, capability, and resolve, vital traits in a contested maritime environment. The decade-long base expansion delivers tangible national security and civil benefits. Forces can now deploy rapidly during typhoons, earthquakes, maritime accidents, or emerging crises, significantly reducing response times. The distributed layout of bases across Luzon, Palawan, Visayas, and Mindanao minimizes single-point vulnerabilities and ensures persistent coverage of strategic corridors from the Taiwan Strait to the Sulu Sea. Modernized bases also serve as dual-use civil-military hubs. They support disaster response operations, provide staging points for law enforcement, and enhance connectivity in remote or underserved areas through infrastructure such as communication towers and transport links. By integrating military capabilities with civilian services, the expansion maximizes return on investment, ensuring that defense modernization contributes to national resilience, humanitarian preparedness, and local development, not just combat readiness. The Philippines' expanded maritime infrastructure also strengthens strategic partnerships and alliance diversification. Beyond its long-standing ties with the United States,
Manila has deepened defense cooperation with Japan, Australia, and selected European countries, creating a network of operational collaboration, intelligence sharing, and joint exercises. These relationships enhance deterrence and build a web of credible presence across Southeast Asia without formal alliance obligations. Within ASEAN, the base expansion signals strategic autonomy. Manila demonstrates that it can secure its maritime interests while respecting regional norms, providing a model for other littoral states balancing sovereignty, defense needs, and great power competition. In the broader Indo-Pacific context, forward-deployed and resilient bases contribute to collective maritime security, ensuring that critical trade routes remain open, energy flows remain uninterrupted, and investor confidence in Southeast Asia is reinforced. By anchoring both national and regional security, these upgrades shows the Philippines' transition from a reactive coastal state to a proactive maritime actor with tangible influence in the Indo-Pacific security architecture.